It's time to set the record straight on what a Stoic man is and modern masculinity. As we dive into this topic, we will explore the society's look at this topic, how we can deal with it, and what the Stoic view is on this. The Via Stoica Podcast with Brendan and Benny. Powered by viastoica.com, your home for coaching, workshops, quotes, and Stoic content that inspires. So welcome to the Via Stoica Podcast. I'm Benny, and I'm here joined by Brendan. Brendan, how are you doing today?
Well, Benny, I am doing well. I'm excited for today's topic. I think it's one that is got a lot of misconceptions. So those are always things that I enjoy having little chats with you about. So looking forward to it. How are you doing today, Benny?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I'm just in a new place again in Athens. Keep moving around, feeling part of the world. And no, I'm definitely ready for this topic as well, to dive into it. It's one that needs to be addressed. And as we kind of mentioned already, we're talking about the Stoic man and masculinity.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I feel like, gets a bit of a bad, I think, definition, especially when it's related to Stoicism. I think there's this idea that, that the Stoic man is this lone wolf kind of off on a journey by themselves, and they only serve themselves, and they put, that sort of thing, a very kind of ego-driven idea. But to me, that is not what the Stoics are about. It's about the community, it's about the whole, it's about what we can do to improve society. So that's where I feel like we're going to take the conversation a little bit today. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on it, Benny, and also like because my thoughts have changed on this over the last probably 5 to 10 years. So I think that's a good thing to go over too. But what about you, Benny? Where do you think this topic we should start? I guess with initially being like, where do you see some of the misconceptions as it relates to Stoicism and masculinity?
Yeah, and maybe a good way to start would be kind of just see, our definition of what a Stoic man is, right? Just a quick kind of like, okay, at the beginning, so people will, the listeners, the audience will know where we're coming from, and also have their view and, their concept, because this is a very hot topic. So if you are listening and you have your views, please leave a comment, because we love to read your takes on it as well. But when I look at the Stoic man, I think we often contribute like strength and all of that to men, right? And I do think that is an attribute of a Stoic man, but we have to redefine that a little bit. So for me, what a Stoic man is, he has, and again, this can also apply to women, to pretty much every person. But now we're looking at men, from this point of view, because it requires some attention. And for me, a Stoic man is someone who has a lot of inner strength, mental fortitude, not physical, but mental fortitude to be able to adapt to whatever the situation requires of this person, but also filled with compassion and kindness. And we can see, like I wrote an article on this on viastoica.com, what the Stoic man is. And I pretty much took Marcus Aurelius as the example. And a few key words that Marcus really highlighted there were compassion, kindness, but also duty. So we have this role in our society that we need to take on. So for me, again, that is what a Stoic man is, to have that inner fortitude, that mental strength, but also the adaptability, kindness, compassion, and a great sense of duty and responsibility to do what is needed for the greater good. But just to kind of go back on that, is like, how would you describe the Stoic man?
Yeah, so to me, the Stoic man is definitely rooted in compassion. So I'm glad you brought that up. I do think that I think of the idea of a Stoic man or men in general, that at some point you're going to be a leader of something. And I'm not saying, a leader of an organization or something like that, but you're the leader of your family. You're the leader to the young men that look up to you. You're a leader to those people in your family. Like, you have some leadership situations in your life that you will have to take on. And I believe that as a Stoic man, if you're someone who follows the teachings and lives by the virtues, well, then looking after others, being that protector, being someone that is that kind of, person that people can lean on and depend on. That to me is what a Stoic man is because we, again, it's, and it's not to say that we always put other people's needs and wants before us, but at the end of the day, we are here. Our duty, what Benny talked about, our duty is to serve the greater good, to serve the greater community, and to do that virtuously. So I do think that compassion and kindness is something that any good leader has. That is to me what a good leader is at the end of the day. Of course, you have those moments where, at the end, like there is this kind of societal understanding that the male or the masculine person is the protector. So there is this idea that, maybe you do have to be physically strong. But I agree with you, Benny, that it's more of a mental toughness. I think that, when I think of someone that's a strong man that I've looked up to throughout my life, that person is not necessarily hitting the gym every day, right? But they're thinking about difficult stuff all the time. They're thinking through difficult problems and contemplating not only how it impacts them and their loved ones, but people outside of that sphere, the community at large, colleagues, things like that. So I think the responsibility of a Stoic man is to consider not just yourself, not just your immediate family, but the overall group and collective, and do that with compassion and kindness.
I like that, and especially to start with that question at the beginning as well about what are the common misconceptions, and one of them is that physical strength, right? And I don't think that, although again, our bodies are a preferred indifference, and we would like to be healthy and we would like to be physically fit in a good condition because that's where we can contribute the best way. But we all have to do that in accordance with our bodies as well, right? So it wouldn't, like, if we would connect physical fitness to being a masculine man or to being a Stoic man, and anyone who gets injured or falls ill or loses that capability then will obviously be disqualified if we only use that sense, right? But that, if you don't have the means to be physically fit, that doesn't mean that you can't still be a Stoic man. And that doesn't mean, and even look for everybody, that doesn't mean that you can't still be a good person. Because that requires, as you mentioned, virtue. That requires those aspects. So, and maybe even you need to have more strength in your mental strength to overcome those obstacles, which will make you even stronger and more resilient for anything that might even come to pass again. So, yes, if you have the capability and if it's something that falls in your nature to be a physically fit person to go to the gym, and you're doing that in a moderate and a well-taught manner, and you know why you're doing it, hey, go ahead. There's nothing wrong with that, but it shouldn't be connected directly to who you are as a person. It shouldn't encompass your entire identity, right? So I think that that's one of those where we look at the debunking of what a Stoic man is according to modern society. When you look at certain, like the Tate brothers or Jordan Peterson or those kind of people, they say this is what a man should be. We can debate that, but I think they miss a lot of the depth and profundity that the Stoics really had in mind when they talk about something like that.
I mean, to me, I don't think any person should be telling you, I mean, I guess we are kind of doing it here, but at the end of the day, this is all for you. Like, it's a simple process of following the virtues, right? Like if you're doing that and you're acting in wisdom and temperance and justice and things of that nature, whether you get up in the morning or make your bed, or whether you get up in the morning and do push-ups or go to the gym or go for a run or whatever, that's not being a man. That's, if you want to do that, wonderful. I'm not trying to, demoralize or demonize it in any way or anything like that. But it just seems to me that these ideas of like, oh, you can only be a man if you do these things. You can only be a man, a man would never do this. Like, that's all up to you. That's all our opinions, right? And what we think about other people's opinions. So I think that's something too to keep in mind, that as with most things that we discuss on here, this is a personal journey. And you get to decide what it is to be masculine in your relationship. And it's not up to Benny or I or anyone else for that matter. So it is an individual journey. And I think it also works differently. When you talk about the kind of masculine, feminine energy, or I don't know, whatever you want to call it, roles, I guess would be a better word, in relationships, that's going to differ from couple to couple. That's going to be a different balance, right? And that's for you as an individual to kind of figure out where you fit in that. And but I wanted to ask you, Benny, maybe we could give the listeners a bit of insights into our own development, and how is your journey with kind of being a man and how you view yourself with, as a masculine person. Like, how does that journey gone for you? How have those views shifted over time?
But that's an interesting journey, because I have three sisters. I grew up, like, I don't have a lot of, well, from one side of the family, I do have a lot of male cousins, and the other side, just two. So I've been very much around women a lot, right? So when I went to college, that was the first time when I really dove into the man world, and that's where I started drinking. Well, the family was also kind of the community where I started drinking, but that's where it just really went to the top, because I felt like this is what it requires to be a man. And I think that this is something where a lot of men go wrong and kind of lose themselves, as I did when I look back at it. And I have no regrets on that period at all, right? Yes, I made silly mistakes, stupid mistakes, bad mistakes, but those are all like a learning. And I think I was lucky enough in many ways as well. That's something that we can't, like there's many people who make massive mistakes during those times that they can't really unwind. I was lucky in that sense. But when I look back at it, um, it was a period where I wasn't myself, where I wasn't living the way I was supposed to be living, because I was trying to fit in with this group of men. And I felt like, hey, this is the way it's supposed to be done, right? To drink, to make jokes, to do all of these things, to do brash things, right? To take risks, to do all of this that I wouldn't normally do. Like, I'm more of an introvert than I realized over the last couple of years. So as I went on that journey from being in that group of men and being married, and also noticed with specific groups how fragile those connections were, especially after I stopped drinking. You can see, not a lot, but with my core groups, that's fine. But with some friends, they kind of dissipate real quick, because that's the glue that holds you together. So when I started going on that journey, I really realized that that wasn't me, and I was trying to put on an image to be part of the men group, right? And I feel that that's what a lot of men tend to do. To be part of it, they could do things that they wouldn't normally do. And as I developed, got married, got into a relationship, then afterwards starting really to dive into who I am, I had to let go of that persona that I created among that men group and find myself again, to be comfortable by myself. That was a big one, right? To be comfortable with being compassionate and kind, not seeing that as a weakness, but seeing that as a strength for people around me. Maybe I'm not I like sports, but it's not something that gets me out of bed, right? I just like, that's not something that I do, and that's fine. So for me, that was one of the biggest parts, to really be comfortable with who I am. And that sounds to a lot of men as a weakness, as something that, no, that's not what a man does. A man needs to man up, needs to face everything with an iron fist and go through a wall or whatever. It's like, yeah, that's just not me, right? I can do, if you need me to do something, I'll do it. And that's, another of the core concepts that I feel like a man is, like, reliable. But this guy goes for everybody, to be reliable. If you need something done, I'll be there. I'll do my best to be there as best as I can, right? And take on the responsibilities and duties that I have to do. So for me, that was a big part of the journey, to discover myself, where I lost myself in being part of that masculine group that I felt like, hey, I want to experience this. But that's kind of what is your journey on, developing your own masculinity?
Oh, that's interesting, Benny. Appreciate you sharing that. For me, it's similar. I actually grew up, my dad wasn't in the picture too much, so I didn't really have a male figure in the household. And then I was really, raised just by my mom. And then I lived with my aunt and my female cousin. So I grew up around 3 women. And then I went to college and moved into a fraternity house. So I lived with, 30 to 40 guys for the next 3 or 4 years, and got very acclimated to what is just pure, unadulterated testosterone. And that was an experience. That was weird. Like you, it became, okay, who can drink the most is basically the manliest. Who can chug beer the fastest is the manliest. Who can get the most girls is the manliest. Like, these sort of things started to kind of fill my brain, and that's what I thought was, okay, that's what I'm supposed to do. And yeah, I don't remember like exactly a moment that I started to shift, but I do remember one point, and this was probably like later on in my college career, senior year or something. And I remember someone coming to my room and saying that, him and some guys were going to go out and try and get girls. And I just remember, like, right as he said it, I was just like kind of disgusted, and I was just like, that seems weird. All right, you guys have fun. See you later. And like, that was the point where I started really shifting to like, why do we go out? Why am I going out just trying to like talk to anything that moves? Like, that's not what I should be. I don't know. It just seemed weird. And that's when I think I started to kind of like make a shift. But yeah, you do get, and I thought I kind of want to go back to what I was saying before. Like, a part of me believes that that a male is supposed to be a leader. And if you're just listening to the whims and woes of others, and you're letting that dictate what you're doing, which is what I did for years, right? Like, my weekend plans were dictated by what my, friends wanted to do. It wasn't me driving anything. You're being a follower. And I not that you shouldn't follow. I think obviously, you're not going to be a leader all the time, but you shouldn't just be someone that's perpetually following and perpetually looking for other people to make decisions for you and decide for you what to do. You need to understand yourself. I think, Benny touched on that a little bit. Understand who you are, what makes you tick, and then, live your life doing that and figuring and aligning it with your virtues and your duty and what you're supposed to do. So these sort of things where we're chasing, it all seems like ego to me. Like, oh, I need to do this because, I got to go, try and hook up with a bunch of girls because that's going to make me feel good. Or if I also feel a lot better when I'm drunk. Like, these are things that I think it's all ego. It's all, Stoicism calls us to go through tough times, to go through challenges, and not to avoid them with vices or distractions like alcohol and women. And I think once you learn that, and once you kind of understand that, or at least for me, once I understood that I was kind of being more of a follower and less of a leader, is when I decided to kind of take that step. So for me personally, I do think there is a lot of leadership that I connect with, masculinity and who I am as a person. I'm a business owner. I have people that work for me. I have people that I have to kind of lead in that sense. But I just think that if everyone thought of it that way, if everyone thought of themselves as a leader of someone, right, even if it's just one person, and you behaved with that sort of mindset, I think people would behave a lot better. We maybe would consider, hey, if my little nephew's watching me, would I be doing this right now? If my little, if my colleague could see me now, would I be, doing this action? I don't know. So it's always good, I think, to kind of have an observer of you and your behaviors. And I think that's one thing that can help you hone in on truly who you are and where your virtues lie. Is imagine someone that you admire or someone that looks up to you, kind of observing your behaviors. Is that something that you would want them to say, like, oh, that's a good man, I look up to that person? Go ahead.
Yeah, and that's where the leader part is a good question as well, right? Because again, when we look at the masculine, the manosphere, the leader is often thought of like a general, like someone who leads in battle. And I would then kind of work against that, push a little bit against that, and saying, like, we need to be an example, right? Instead of being, and then you can either become a leader to those who see it, and you might not even know that you are becoming a leader. But I think being an example, and that's what you kind of mentioned as well, to think about how your actions are being perceived by the people that observe you and that you have an influence on. And that shows the social aspect. You put out, like you mentioned at the very beginning, the lone wolf part. Like, a lot of men, they like, I want to be this lone wolf, this scary guy, that people are afraid of. But Stoics actually look at it completely different. They say, we want to be a social person that people can gather around to and that they can flock to if they're in trouble, but that we can also reach out to other people. And we don't want to have that symbol of being scary. So being the right example and setting, that's where the Stoics give us the great handles that they give us, being virtuous, living in accordance with nature. It's all there. Now, the execution, that is a very different story, right? That's where it becomes difficult, but we can become that right example. And from that, it kind of perpetuates to finding the right purpose, because that's where a lot of men now seem to struggle. And I think that this is also the big part of why this episode is important, because finding the right purpose is really important for everyone, right? For not just men and, what women, just us in general. We want to have a meaningful, purposeful life. And the best way to do that is to fulfill your role the best way possible. And that's where the Stoics, they have the role ethics. They teach us, okay, if you don't know what to do, think about the part that you're playing in that moment. Think about the role that you are. Are you a parent, then make sure that you are the best parent you can be. Are you a brother or a sister? To make sure that you are the best version of yourself. And are you a partner in a business? Are you a colleague, a friend? Make sure that you think about the role that you're playing in that moment and do that the best as you can. And that will give you so much more satisfaction and meaning to life than searching for it in externals, searching for it in a career or a money or cars. The things that you see on YouTube a lot that shows men in particular what it means to be successful. While the Stoics, they bring it back to the simplicity. Just be a good person. Marcus Aurelius says that, right? He says, hey, stop talking about what a good person is and go be one. And that's what we've got to go back towards. So setting that right example, finding your purpose in the role that you're playing right there, I think that would be a good start to begin with.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Like this idea of playing your role or doing your duty, right? Doing your job of what you're supposed to do. And the beauty of it is, you, like you said, you get to determine that for yourself. Like, you have to find your purpose, and that's your duty. But I do think that there is like a general theme here, because I try and answer the question that we're trying to ask, which is like, what is the Stoic man? And this idea, we started the conversation around compassion and kindness, but to me, it's like a whole concept of a safe haven for others. People want, almost like you imagine like a safe harbor where, boats can seek refuge. And that's what I think a Stoic man should be. Is it's someone that is reliable and calm, and not going to have these sort of erratic behaviors or emotions, which goes back to what you were talking about earlier with the mental toughness versus the physical toughness. I feel like those are things that are just calm and very solid sort of ideas. And that's what, to me, a Stoic man should be, is someone who is reliable and solid and unwavering, even in the most tumultuous of winds. You're standing there calm and resolved because you are there as a safe haven for others. So I really love that kind of illustration or view that we've been talking about here. But as you were saying with role, like a role ethics and what is your role, I think that's a great question to be asking ourselves, especially in those situations. I wish I asked that question more of myself when I was in university, like, oh, what is my role here? But that was where I did kind of feel myself floating around without purpose and without direction. And it wasn't until I said, maybe I should start doing this and doing that, and started pursuing a path, that I started to feel that masculine sort of like knowing myself, right? There's a confidence that comes with knowing yourself and understanding yourself. And I think that when you start to exude that confidence in not an egotistical way, but just a solid confidence, that is when the people start looking up to you and asking you, how did you do that? And why do you think this way? And this is what it talks about, like, referencing Marcus Aurelius, don't talk about a good man, go be one. Well, as you're being one, people will naturally want to talk to you about that. So I do think, like, as you were talking about, being that example is definitely something that goes along with this concept, to kind of be an example to others and play your role and be a good man, be a good person.
Yeah. And like to think about the role, it doesn't, it also applies that sometimes we have to take a step back, right? At one point we don't want to be the leader because maybe our skills aren't the best for this moment. And that's something that we also have to acknowledge sometimes, that, okay, now this person is leading because my best way in this situation is to follow this person, to be disciplined enough to take on the instructions, the orders, whatever it is, to do what is necessary. And that, you mentioned confidence. And when we talk about what a Stoic man is confidence. And then you can be that beacon of trust, that right example in any situation, because you know who you are. And based on that, you will know what you need to be doing, what your skills are, where you need to be presenting yourselves the best way possible. And Marcus Aurelius says that twice, I think, in his meditation. He recalls him like to stand up straight, not straightened, right? You need to be able to hold yourself up straight and just, and be that confidence. And you can only do that if you know who you are. And that is for a lot of people, that is a very scary undertaking, right? To really start asking yourself those questions. And a lot of men shy away from it because it feels like a weakness to go and sit with your own pain and to go and develop it and to discover what it is that you're struggling with. But that is one of those journeys that takes a lot of Stoic courage. And that's another word that gets often used and mingled up in this conversation, the word courage. And we talked about it a little bit, as I said, when I was in college, I would do all these stupid things and just risky things and think, oh, look at me being courageous here, right? But one key aspect in having courage as a Stoic means that you need to make sure that it's the wise and just thing to do. Not just doing something because it's scary, risky, or dangerous. If there's no need for it, then why are you doing it? But you need to make sure that you are doing the right thing. And because that's scary and you still do it, that is true courage. And one of those aspects is to delve into who you are, to go and sit with your problems, to discuss it, right? But also to see like, hey, how can I go forward? And that's, for example, something that we do with Stoic coaching, is where we will look at where you are right now and help you move forward from this and help you face those obstacles, give you the tools to overcome them, to see them as the training ground that you need to become that whole person at the other end of that obstacle, and to finally meet yourself there and to stand up straight and to walk around and be that example that you need to be for. But what do you feel about that? Like that courage, how that is involved with this concept of Stoic masculinity?
No, I think it's definitely, I mean, courage as one of the virtues is definitely something that is involved here. And I think because the idea, like what you touched on, is that this is difficult. This is hard to kind of get to know ourselves. And, and as we start to kind of wrap up this conversation, one thing I did want to, hit on before we go is the idea of emotions and how does a Stoic man deal with emotions and emotional response, whether that's positive or negative emotions. And, contrary to popular belief, Stoic men cry. Stoic men embrace their emotions. Stoic men sit in their emotions, understand their emotions. They do not stuff down their emotions. They do not turn away from them. Of course, we practice temperance, right? One example that Seneca touches on is grief, right? You go through grief, you experience it, but you don't let it take over your whole life. You might cry, you might feel sad because you lost a loved one, but you don't let it, take 5 years of your life away. You have some temperance there and you have some control there. So I think that this idea that does get thrown around amongst, whether we're talking about Stoic men or just masculinity in general, is that you don't show emotions. You have this stern face. If you're upset, that's, you don't really let anyone know. And I don't think that's true. I think, whether you're talking about a good man or a good leader, anything like that, it's being honest and authentic with people. And honest and this authenticity means that sometimes we're sad, sometimes we're angry, sometimes we're frustrated, and not to stuff those things away or try and ignore them, but try to understand them and get to know them. Treat them like your neighbor, right? You want to get to know them and know their name and see how they act and behave, but they don't have to live in your house. So I think that's a good idea also with emotions, is to understand that, we're not someone that's trying to turn emotions off. It's not like anger is an emotion that serves us and sadness is one that doesn't. They're all signals to what's going on in our body. They're all signals into like what's happening internally within us. And those are things that we should attempt to understand and not necessarily, stuff away. But yeah, what are your thoughts there, Benny, on specifically emotions and how men or the Stoic man should handle those?
Yeah, the Stoic man shouldn't show any emotions. That's obviously the thing that is being spread around a lot, right? And I think you hit it on the spot right there where it matters. It's like, again, we need that courage to understand our emotions. It's information, and if we, maybe that's what we need to deflect this concept towards. It's like, this is information for us to know who we are. Yes, we can feel sadness, we can feel anger, but we shouldn't act out of it, right? But we should reflect on it. And we should understand where it's coming from and why am I getting angry? Why am I getting upset? How can I pause? How can I create a space between that trigger and my actions to really think about what I need to do? And just to add to what you were saying, I think one of the great tools that we have is support, right? We are here together. We all undergo these emotions. No, you can ask people, it's like, hey, what does it feel like to be angry? Everybody can give you an answer. Maybe they have different reactions, but people know what it feels like. So we can talk to other people. And that's one other thing that I think men struggle with, to find people to talk to. And that's at least what I've seen. I've seen with the coaching that it feels like there's a safe space where we can talk to someone, where you can let it out and just share the thoughts and feelings that you have without being judged. And that's something that is difficult for men, because again, if you call a man weak, I always feel that that's a kryptonite, like the male kryptonite, to tell someone you're weak. But we all need to express and delve into those things. So again, emotions are a big part of being human for men and women, and we need to explore them and where they come from. And the great thing, once you start doing that, the effects, the impulses of the events will be less and less. You will find less of emotional outbursts because you know where they're coming from. So it is funny, like I always talk about, the Stoic person is like a brick wall, doesn't show emotions. And if you really start to go on the path of Stoicism, you will not experience those emotions the way you used to before. So maybe in one way you kind of become that person to other people. It's like, oh, why aren't you feeling these emotions? It's like, yeah, I'm feeling them, but I just know how to deal with them better now. And maybe you get to feel more positive emotions like joy, which is pretty much what the Stoics want us to do. So yeah, I think that's a great addition there at the end, the emotions and how to deal with it. But, again, as we wrap it up, the Stoic man encompasses everything that is human, because we are human beings as well. And the same as, women, and we all face it. Life is difficult. Seneca says, why weep for parts of life? Well, all of life, can require our tears. In that sense, it's difficult to be alive. Mm-hmm. And we need to show that compassion and kindness to ourselves, but also to everybody around us. And, again, men struggle with a lot of things. And I think Bill Burr said it, men are allowed to be fine or angry, But we have these things in the middle as well. And that's what we've got to acknowledge, the fact that, yes, we do have those things and we should find the support that we have. And that's what we do here at Via Stoica, to offer the coaching, workshops, just to give you more context and help you find a better way of dealing with it and discovering who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said, Benny. And yeah, if you want to talk about anything, whether it's your own personal journey with masculinity or things like that, you can book a free consultation with either Benny or I at viastoica.com. So free 30 minutes just to kind of chat with us. We'd love to get to know you a little bit as a listener and maybe help you out too. So yeah, that's definitely available if you're interested. I do agree with you, Benny, that this idea that men need a community. Men need other men to talk to. We've had such a history where it was, men were kind of on their own, and it wasn't, because they just had them and then their family, and they didn't actually have a group to go to. And I think that's super important. And especially if that group is, based in Stoic philosophy, because I happen to be a big fan of Stoic philosophy. But no, it's a great conversation. I think we, kind of really covered a lot here. But I mean, I think we got to listen to Marcus Aurelius and stop talking about being a good man and go be one. So thank you for listening today. Thank you, Benny, for your time. Appreciate you as always. And we'll see you guys next time here on the Via Stoica Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Via Stoica Podcast. If you have enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, rating, and leaving a review. Your feedback will help us reach more like-minded people on the journey to self-improvement. If you want to get in touch with us or find more information, you can go to viastoica.com, your one-stop platform for all things Stoicism and living better. And remember, virtue is the only good.